Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Vinyl Den, your channel for record collecting by record collectors. I'm Nick. It's Tuesday, time to talk about some new releases coming out this Friday, November 8th. There's almost 500 albums coming out this week. I got 12 on my list for today. There's a bunch of links down below. You got links for the Vinyl Den Facebook group, for the merch page, for the Spotify and Apple Music playlist that I put together every week, and the Patreon page. So make sure you check all that out. Like always, if you enjoyed the episode, make sure you give me a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button down below, and make sure you hit that notification bell so you're notified every time I release new episodes. Like I said in the intro, there's almost 500 albums coming out this week, but I'm only going to talk about 12 of them on the show though today. So if something I don't talk about, make sure you drop me a comment down below. Let me know what you're looking forward to grabbing. Like always, if you're unable to find any of these in your local brick and mortar stores, they should all be available online. I'll put links down below in the comment section for them. You can always go over to the Vinyl Den store on Amazon also. There's pre-orders on there. There's new releases on there. There's deals on vinyl. There's accessories. All sorts of cool stuff to check out. So there's no huge heavy hitter albums coming out this week, but there are a couple of really good under-the-radar albums that are going to be released. The first one is one I didn't know anything about until just recently. Within the last week, I saw stuff pop up on this. This is Bad Astronaut Untethered. It's their fourth studio album. It's going to run you about $28 online. If you're unfamiliar with Bad Astronaut, they're an alternative rock band formed in the early part of the 2000s. They're actually a side project of Lagwagon, who is a pop-punk band from the 90s. Their first couple of albums are absolutely fantastic, but this is their first album since 12 Small Steps, One Giant Disappointment was released back in 2006. The drummer actually died in 2005, so when that album came out, that was like the end of the band. But then a couple of years ago, they released a box set of all their material. I think they've played a couple of shows since then. They decided to put this new album together. So what you're getting on this album are 9 classic Bad Astronaut tracks, really just stripped down. It's just vocals, piano, and cello on here. Like I said, it's a very different album than what they released before. If you're unfamiliar with Bad Astronaut, go back and check out any of their first 3 albums. There's not a bad album among them. I've got all 3 of them on vinyl. I listen to them pretty regularly. Actually, I bought them on CD. I love those albums so much. So you got that coming out this week. I'll definitely grab a copy of that. And then you got Bob Marley Exodus. This is a deluxe edition that's coming out this week. This was released back in 1977. It was his 9th studio album. This is a 1 LP, 1 10-inch deluxe edition. This was a landmark album in Bob's career. So this was written after the assassination attempt. He was on exile in London. They took their time putting this album together, and I think what they ended up crafting was not only one of Bob's best albums, I think it's one of the best albums of all time. I don't have a copy of it. I should grab this one. So what you're getting in this deluxe edition, there's a 10-inch that has dub versions of Exodus Jamming and Punky Reggae Party. There's also some rare tracks on there. There's some live stuff on there. You know, like I said, this is going to run about $46, so it's a little bit on the pricier end, but I think what you're getting in this I think the extra material is worth it. The next album is another one where I hadn't heard a whole lot about it until just recently. This is the Pineapple Thief Last to Rum. This is a new EP from them. It's going to be on green vinyl. It's going to run you about $23. So the band earlier this year released a new album called It Leads to This. So what this new EP is, are 5 additional tracks from those recording sessions. If you're unfamiliar with Pineapple Thief, I think they're one of the best progressive rock bands out there nowadays. And I'm kind of glad that they're releasing this as a separate release. I know, releasing these like deluxe editions, a year after the album comes out, where they're just like adding tracks onto it, has been kind of all the rage for the last couple of years, and more bands are starting to do that. So I'm glad to see that they're not following that trend. They're actually just releasing these tracks as a separate release. At least this got a lot of really great reviews earlier this year, so I'm sure this one's going to be good also. It's one I'll stream and check out. And then you got Eric Clapton, To Save a Child, coming out this week. This was released back in July of this year. This was originally released on, I think it was CD, vinyl, and Blu-ray. This came out. This is a live performance he did in London in December 23. So this is going to run you about $40 online. All the proceeds from that show went to aid children in Gaza. He did record a new song for the performance, which is Prayer of a Child. This is 12 tracks, from across his career. Most of his best-known tracks are on this one. This is another one where, I'll probably stream it and check it out. I think I'm not the biggest Eric Clapton fan, but I like some of his older stuff. But I haven't heard any of his live material in the past probably 10 years or so. So, like I said, it's one I'll stream and check out. There's a couple of anniversary reissues coming out this week. The first one is Rival Sons, Great Western Valkyrie. This came out back in 2014 as a 4th studio album. 2 LP release, 10th anniversary. It's going to run you about $38. This was Rival Sons' big breakthrough album. This is the album that really introduced the world to their brand of blues rock. I love this album. I think Rival Sons, they're one of those bands where when people talk about rock music being dead, I always point people to that band because they've done so many great stuff across their career. This is like a more of like a raw, energetic kind of album that than what they'd released earlier, and one that I think really kind of set the pace for what they would do on their next several albums. I think this really cemented their place as one of the leaders in the modern rock revival. This also has 2 additional bonus tracks on here, so it's one that I don't have on vinyl. I probably should grab a copy of it this week. And then you got Elliot Smith, From a Basement on a Hill, released in 2004. It was his 6th and final studio album. It's going to be on Twilight Blue vinyl. It's going to run you about $35. It's all newly remastered. So Elliot recorded this between 2000 and 2003. And there was like multiple delays along the line. He really, I think he wanted to release it. It was like late 2002 or early part of 2003. It didn't get released until almost a year after his death. And it was a heavier, kind of darker album than what Elliot had released earlier in his career. It was met with wide critical acclaim. It's unfortunate he didn't get to see, how great this album ended up being. There are a couple of really good debut albums that are getting deluxe releases this week. The first one was Talking Heads 77. Released in 1977. This is a 2 LP release. It's going to run you about $33 online. This is all newly remastered. So this comes with the second LP of just a bunch of, there's outtakes on here, there's alternate versions, some of them are unreleased. Of course, this album is known for Psycho Killer, but this is an album where beginning and end, there's not a bad track on here. I've always considered this one of the best debut albums of the later part of the 70s. It's also an album I haven't listened to in a really long time, so I definitely need to go back through and listen to it. I do need to grab a copy of it on vinyl also. And then you got Ratt, Out of the Cellar, coming out, released in 1984. This is their debut album also. It's going to run you about $40 online. It's going to be on red and black splatter vinyl. This is one of the defining albums of 80s glam metal. At least, like I said, in my opinion. I'm sure other people out there might have a different opinion. And I'm not the biggest Ratt fan, but I've always loved this album. I remember Round and Round was, of course, the big track on here. Got a bunch of radio play. I saw the video on MTV quite a bit when I was growing up. And that was the song that really kind of got me into this album. And I felt like listening to other Ratt albums after this one, I didn't quite have the same feeling as I did on this one. But you're not getting as much extra material with this album than you are with that Talking Heads release. So this comes with a 7-inch with an unreleased track on there called Reach for the Sky. It's one that, I definitely need to go back through and check out. Really, I need to go back through and check out both of those albums. Neither one it's probably been at least 15 years since I listened to either one of them. But I'll probably grab that Talking Heads album. But we'll see about the other one, though. I do have to admit that the next album is one that took me way too long to get around to listening to. It's probably been within the last maybe year and a half, 2 years that I finally listened to it. And I should have heard it, a couple of decades ago because of how good it is. This is Violent Femmes, Hallowed Ground. This was released back in 1984 as their second studio album. It's going to run you about $24 online. So it's a much more darker, much more experimental album than their debut. Their debut was a huge album. It was a platinum selling album in the U.S. And it's always going to be hard for a band to follow up that kind of success because a lot of bands want to just like re-record what they did on that first album. Try to pass that off. But that's not what the Violent Femmes wanted to do. They wanted to do something completely different. And this was met with a lot of really mixed reviews when this album came out. And I think mainly it was because, people expected another copy of their debut album. It was so different. It was so drastically different than that first album. And I think that's why it was met with some mixed reviews or some kind of bad reviews, actually. But looking on this album, 40 years later, it's almost grown into this almost like a cult-like status on this album. It's a really fantastic album. Is it as good as their first album? Probably not, but I do love a lot of the tracks on this one. And actually, there's a couple of tracks on this one I've listened to more in the last couple of years than some of the stuff off that debut. So you got that one coming out, and then you got Knocked Loose, A Different Shade of Blue, coming out. This is a completely different album than Violent Femmes. This was released in 2019. It was their second studio album. It's going to run you about $26 online. So this is kind of a metalcore meets hardcore album, and I've never been a big metalcore fan. But when the single and Still I Want Her South came out, that was really like my entry point into Knocked Loose. This album was met with like widespread critical acclaim. I think it's probably the best album that Knocked Loose has released. If you haven't listened to them before and you're a newer metal fan, when I say newer, I mean like metal that's been released in the last 10 or 15 years, definitely check out Knocked Loose. There's one jazz release that's coming out this week that I'm not all that familiar with. This is Ben Webster, At the Renaissance. This was recorded back in 1960. It wasn't released until 1985, though, so I'm not sure why the big time gap is in that one, but it's going to run you about $30 online. This is part of the Contemporary Records Acoustic Sound Series. These are always mastered by Bernie Grunman from the original analog tapes. They're pressed at QRP. It's overseen, the whole process is overseen by Chad Kassem from Acoustic Sound. So you know they're going to sound good. They always do. So with Ben, I'm mainly familiar with his work with Duke Ellington. I'm not familiar with any of the stuff he's done as a band leader. This is all recorded live at the Renaissance in Hollywood in October 1960. He's got some good musicians on this one, though. He's got Jim Hall, Jimmy Rowles, Red Mitchell, Frank Butler. Like I said, I'm not familiar with this one. I'll definitely stream this one and check it out this week. Then the last one on my list this week is Foreigner, Inside Information. Released in 1987. It was their 6th studio album. This is a Friday Music release, which Friday Music always does a really good job with their releases. They tend to be a little pricier, though. It's going to run you about $38. It's going to be on clear vinyl. In my opinion, this was Foreigner's last really good album. This is the album they released right after Agent Provocateur, which is my favorite album by the band. And this was the last album that Lou Gramm was really kind of a part of. So after this album was released, he left the band to kind of focus more on his solo career. He did rejoin the band for one album in the mid part of the 90s. They released Mr. Midnight, which I was not a fan of at all. Like I said, I think this was the last really good album by the band. Commercially, it did pretty well. It debuted at number 15 on the Billboard 200. It went platinum here in the U.S. It sold a ton of copies. But by 87, they weren't selling nearly as many copies of their albums as they were earlier in the 80s. You know, it's an album where, you know, if I had to like rank Foreigner albums, I know this might be kind of an unpopular opinion, but I'd probably put this one up in probably the top 3 or 4 albums. Well, that's all I got for you today, guys. Thanks for checking the show out. Like I said, there's not a bunch of huge releases coming out this week, but I think there's a lot of stuff that's kind of flown under the radar. I'm definitely going to grab a copy of that Bad Astronaut release. I'll probably grab Bob Marley. I'll probably grab that Rival Sons. There's some other ones I got some question marks next to. But let me know what you guys are looking forward to grabbing this week. Like always, if you enjoyed the episode, make sure you give me a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button down below. That's all I got. Until next time, keep all spinning. Peace.